things to her. You are my sister, so you say, and you want to help me, then let me go free, Jolene had said to Patsy. I cannot, as you know, you are rose branded. You cannot be freed. The only thing you can do out there is get your life taken. I refuse to see this happen, I told her. You are as bad as any of them, she said, and Danny looked to me, then her. I only looked to Brian. Replace her in her room and make sure she is fed properly and secure there. Before we leave, secure her so she cannot run or harm herself, I said. You say you want to help me, yet you order me chained, she snarled to me. I love you, Jolene. There has not a day that has went by I did not think of you after I was freed. I tried to find you. However, I knew not how. I knew not know where you were. Danny has found you. I will not let you harm yourself, and you will have to learn. You have no choice. You have to follow the decree. When you can behave, then you will be freed of the chains, I told her, and looked to Danny. With a wave of his hand, Brian took her out. As she was out of our sight, I heard her scream. Then I heard Brian grunt. I knew she had struck him. I closed my eyes, said a silent prayer to Odin, and looked back to Danny. I will not touch her unless you wish it. However, she runs again. I do not know what to do, he told me. She runs again. I guess you will have to teach her to obey. I see no other way. She is my sister. However, she is not my sister. Not the Jolene I knew. Please, Danny, do not have her destroyed, I pleaded. I would not do that to you. However, she will not obey unless made to. You understand this? He replied. I nodded my head and placed my head on his shoulders. I felt very regretful for Jolene. However, she had to learn to obey the decrees, or they would have her destroyed, and I would not see my baby sister destroyed. Okay, chapter 21. After the concert, we prepared to leave the next village, which was Socratine. Jolene was placed in chains. Her ankles were chained so that she could not actually run anywhere. I hated it. However, she made it quite clear she would not listen and would try and escape. I was getting ready to rest after the concert in Socratine. Socratine. I was sitting in the sitting room of the cottage when Jolene came in. I looked regretful to her. If I promise not to try and escape, will you believe me and release these chains? She asked me. Jolene, I do not like you in those chains to begin with. So if you tell me you will not fight with any or try to escape, then yes, I can have them removed, I told her. What about Sir Hellion? She asked. I sighed as she called Danny that. His name is Danny, and he is your master, I told her. Whatever. Will he allow it? She asked then. If I ask him to, he will, I replied. Then I promise to behave. Just release these chains. They are uncomfortable, she replied. I will have Brian do it as soon as they return. Go get ready to rest, I told her, standing. She nodded and turned to go to the room she was staying in. I moved to the room Danny and I were in, and after taking a bath, I laid on the bed. When Danny came in, he sat on the bed and kissed my head. I opened my eyes to look to him. Please have Brian remove the chains on Jolene, I said. Are you sure that is a wise move? He asked as he laid down beside me. I shrugged. Honestly, I'm without knowing. However, she did tell me she would not try, and leave. I want to show her that we will trust her and give her a chance. I replied, snuggling up to him. Very well, I will tell him in the morn, before we take out. One more village and home we will head. He smiled, and I laid beside him and soon had drifted off to sleep. That next morning, as we started to take out, Jolene came over to me. The chains had been removed. Thank you, she said to me. Just do not let me down, little sister, I told her. I will not. Try and run, she told me. I nodded to her, and we all prepared to leave, then traveled to Lorden. We would spend the night, then the following afternoon would be the concert. Then the next morning we would leave, heading back to the kingdom of Atlantis. It was the following day, as I was getting ready to go to the concert, that Jolene came into the room. I looked over to her and smiled. Yes, I asked. Would I be permitted to go and see the concert? She asked. If you promise me you will not leave the hall, I will ask Danny, I told her. I promise I will not try and escape, she told me. Danny came into the room and looked to me, then to her. She remained standing. I sighed. Jolene, heal, please, I asked her. I watched her take a deep breath and then move to her knees. Danny cleared his throat, moved over to where I was sitting at the vanity. He leaned and kissed me on my neck. You about ready? He asked me. Yes. Danny, I asked, turning to face him. What? He asked. Can Jolene come to the hall? I asked him. He looked to me, then looked back to her. As much as I want to tell you no, I cannot. So I suppose she can, if that is what you want. He told me, and I smiled and stood and hugged him. Thank you, I said happily. I had hoped that if we showed her, we would trust her, she would behave better. We all left and went to the hall. I took Jolene by the stage where I would have stood. I want you to stand here, and I do not want you to go anywhere. Understand me, I told her. Patsy, I told you I would not try and escape while I'm here. I promise, she told me. I gave her a hug. Jolene, things will be better for you, I promise, I told her. She nodded her head and looked around. I moved to the back of the stage and got ready to go on. I walked back and Mike, too, looked to me, then behind me. Where is your sister? He asked. I stood her by the stage. She promised me she would not leave, I told him. Patsy, I know you want to trust her. So do we all, he was saying when his name was announced. He and Laura moved out onto the stage. Soon Brian came backstage, and I looked to him with hope Jolene was where I left her. Was Jolene by the stage? I asked him. Yes. She was standing there watching. I think she will be all right, he said with confidence in his voice and a smile to me. Soon Mike and Laura came back off the stage and back. Mike smiled. All right, I will admit I am wrong. She is staying where you told her to, he smiled. I returned his smile as Danny kissed me and took off up on stage, and as I was called, I moved out, and Jolene was where I asked her to be. We sung 3 songs, then left the stage. Everything was going well until we all moved out on stage for the last song, and when I looked over where Jolene should have been, she was not. My face paled, and I looked at Danny, and then over where she should have been. Do not worry about it. Brian is watching her, and so is Donald. If she did try and leave, far she would not have gotten, and also there are guards outside the area. It is all right, he assured me. After the last song, I moved quickly backstage, and Brian was there. Where is she? I asked, ready to actually slap her. She is all right, Patsy. She moved to go to the rest area and was speaking to someone. She is back where you left her, Brian told me. I felt bad for questioning her. However, I knew I had to keep an eye on her and my guard on her, or that thought I did. The next morning after the show we took out of Lorden, all was going well, or I thought it was. Jolene had not tried anything and was actually getting along with Sandy and the other two Dinahs. This I was glad of. It was the second night into the travels that the guys had the instruments and were playing around with them. Laura and I were working on a new song to perform together, and Jolene, Sandy, and the others were preparing something to eat. There was some rustling noise coming from the forest way. I looked over to the guys as Brian moved over to Danny and Mike. Not sure as to what is causing the commotion. Perhaps animals, Brian said. No, it is human. We have been stalked ever since we left Lauren, Mike had said. They seem to be getting braver and closer, Danny said, placing his guitar to the ground and standing. The others stood also. I watched the 6 of them. Laura, you and Patsy go into one of the tents. Kevin, get the girls and place them into the tent with Patsy and Lauren. Mike, called Kevin, was one of the guards with us. We moved as they wanted into one of the tents. Soon the others joined us. What is going on? Sandy asked as they moved into the tent and healed. We are not sure. Seems we are being followed, Laura said. Followed? Jolene questioned as she was still standing, and she moved to set to the side. With us was Mike, Alex, Danny, Tony, and their band members, also 4 guards, plus the 3 I mentioned. We heard the sound of swords clash. I looked to Laura and heard to I. She stood and moved to the opening of the tent, then moved back quickly as another entered with a sword to her throat. It was a man. He smiled to us, then looked about to all there. Greetings, he said, and moved in closer, reaching down. He grabbed me by the arm and pulled me up. I screamed and tried to fight him. He slapped me. No, enough, I heard Jolene say. They will not attack us as long as we have her, the man said. Let her go, I heard Jolene say, and move up to him. No, he said, and pulled me out of the tent as 2 others entered. I watched the man hand Jolene a sword, and then made Laura and Sandy and the other 3 move out of the tent. Jim, let her go. You were to grab me, you dumbass, not her, Jolene said. Change of plans, Joey. You are just a court. She's a famous entertainer, he said to Jolene. Jolene, you promised, I said to her, as I felt the tears come to my eyes. I promised I would not try and escape, and I did not. Well, until now. However, I would not have if Jim would have done as we planned. She said, as if this was just all right. What was going on? You do not know you are in the camp of the Sultan Circle. I tried to reason with them. You shut up. I could care less, he said, and took my elbow and moved it back, and took his elbow and moved it back. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. You shut up. I could care less, he said, and I took my elbow and moved it back into his chest. He made a sound of pain and let go. I moved away from him and started to run into the forest way. My arm was grabbed. The next thing, I am not sure what happened. I felt a sharp pain in my stomach, and a female had a hold of my arm, one by one hand, and a sword in her other, and that sword was in my stomach. No, I heard Jolene scream, and I fell to the ground, and another sharp pain was felt as the female yanked the sword from my body. No, I heard Jolene say again. Then I felt her hand on my shoulder, and she was on the ground beside me. My vision was becoming blurry. The last thing I remember was hearing the sound of swords clash and seeing Danny over me, and all went black. Okay, chapter 2. As I sat at the crystal pond, it was peaceful. I sat there with a stick, moving the water about. Not a thought seemed to come to my mind as to where I was or even how I had gotten here, or further, as to why. It was as if I had not a care in the world. Around Crystal Pond were the most beautiful flowers and trees, small animals and insects. As I mentioned, it was peaceful and so beautiful. Now, for those who do not know what Crystal Pond is or where it is, I will enlighten you. Crystal Pond is said to be in Asgard, to the right of Odin's castle, Valhalla, and in the Garden of Odin. I felt a hand move to my shoulder. "'Tis time you must return," a voice said. I opened my eyes and felt as if I could not breathe. I felt very cold. My head was cloudy. It felt heavy. I then felt Danny's arms around me as I caught my breath. "You are all right," I heard him say as I was leaning against him. "Try and breathe normal. It is all right," he said, and I was finally able to catch my breath. I looked about the room, then to him. "What happened?" "Where's Jolene?" I asked as she pushed into my head, and the concern raised as I remember what had happened. I knew I was home at the cottage. "Jolene is all right. You slipped into twilight on us," he said, keeping his arm around me. "How long was I out for?" I asked. "About 3 weeks," he replied. "The others that seemed to know her?" I asked. "There were 6 of them, 2 men and 4 females. The men's lives were taken, and one of the females. The other 3 are in custody, and Jolene is here with us still," he replied. "Danny, forgive me," I said, feeling this was all my fault. I should not have asked for her to be allowed to go to the hall. "'Tis all right. None of this is actually any fault of yours," he replied. I leaned against him, crying. He held me for a long time, or until a knock came at the door. "Enter," Danny had said, and his brother Emmett and another young boy came in. "Pretty lady wake up yet?" Emmett asked. I smiled, seeing him. "Hey, Squirt." "Yes, she is awake. What do you need?" he asked as he came over to the bed. Emmett climbed up on it and kissed me on the forehead, and I laughed softly. "Hey there, little flirt," I said weakly to him. I still felt as if I had no energy. "Hey, pretty lady, you give us all a scare," he said. "I had Dad's buys me's your discs. You know, you sing like a whispering bird," he told me. "Thank you. Always the charmer." I said, and looked to the young man standing to the side of the bed. Greetings, I said to him. Greetings, he is right. You can sing to me all night if you wanna, the other said, and I laughed. This be Law. He be my best friend, Emmett told me. He is as charming as you are, I told him. Yup, Emmett said, and I laughed. She gonna need something to eat, Emmett said, looking to Danny. Right. You and Law want to let Jolene know that Patsy is awake and send her up here with the tray of soup and bread? Danny said, and I looked to him. I was not sure if I heard him right, or was there another Jolene now in the cottage? Sure thing, Emmett said, kissing my forehead. Again, then jumped down, and he and Law took out running out of the room. He has been here every day since we returned, and he found out you were hurt. I think he likes you. Now you would not leave me for my younger brother, would you? He said with a laugh in his voice. Danny, you are so silly. Did you send him to tell Jolene as in my sister? I asked. Yes, I did. I would think you would want to see her, he replied. I thought you would have placed her in a field or cage, I said sadly. Nah, she may have wished I did. However, I did not, he said. How is she doing? I asked. She is all right, Patsy. I hope she will continue to be. However, only time will tell, he told me. What happened after I became hurt? I asked. He sighed. I had her placed back in chains. When we arrived, I had the others with her taken to Father's debate. Then I had you and her brought here. I introduced her to her whip and training to this cottage. I will say I had to refrain from beating her into twilight, he said. The door opened and I watched my little sister enter. She moved into the room and into a heel holding the tray. She did not move nor say a word. I looked to her as Danny moved out from behind me and I sat up more. He took the tray and she leaned forward into a royal greeting. Jolene, you may relax, Danny told her, and she stood and moved quickly over to me. Patsy, please, please, please forgive me, please, she cried, placing her arms about me. I placed my arms around her and held her. 'Tis all right, I am, or I will be all right, I told her. They were not to harm any of you, especially you, she cried more. Jolene, 'tis all right, calm down. I will not ask why, because it is over with. Let it remain in the past where it is, I told her. She calmed some and sat on the side of the bed as Danny placed the tray on my lap. Want soda? He asked. Yes, please, I replied. Jolene started to move from the bed. No, 'tis all right. You may remain with Patsy. I will get it, Danny said as he moved out of the room. I smiled to Jolene, placed my hand on her leg. I am glad you are safe, I told her. I was so worried you would not awake. My master kept telling me you would. However, he knew not when, she said, and I felt a weight lift off my chest, hearing her speak of Danny as such. My master? I said with a smile. If I call him anything other, he will whip me, and that whip of his is something I would rather not feel, she told me. I am so regretful for you, I replied. It is all right. At least we are together now. At least for now, she replied. Jolene, promise me you will not try anything else stupid. Please. I almost cried. She nodded her head as Danny re-entered and handed me my glass, and I took it. She had best not. We have had our talk. Now, have we not, Jolene? He said to her. Yes, my master, Your Dinah will not try and escape again, she replied to him. If you do, and when found, he asked. Then your Dinah will find herself in the picking field, she replied. Do you wish to return to that field? He asked. No, my master, please allow me to serve you and my mistress, she replied, and I blinked and looked at Danny. He smiled. Her collar now reads Property Danny and Patsy Lee, he told me. I looked and noticed her collar was gold, and I nodded as I continued to eat. Her duty is to you, Danny said then. I smiled to him and handed her the tray, and she took it. As I ate, my strength returned, and I motioned for Danny. Lover boy, come here, I called to him, and he moved over to me, and I grabbed him and kissed him and hugged him tight. Thank you so much for all you have done, I said to him. I have no idea how I could ever repay you, I then said. You can promise to never leave me, Patsy Lee, he said, kissing me. I promise with all my soul and heart and entire being, I said. Then 'tis paid in full, my lover girl, he said, and I laughed. My life matters. Well, let me see what's going on. My life made a small change. Instead of singing at the tavern every night, I found myself making discs and entertaining at the public events with the royal band. I was enjoying myself. Jolene was right beside me. She calmed down. I was not sure what Danny did to her. However, she was a different person from when I first saw her again. Now she was somewhat obedient. I still sung songs at the tavern. After all, I was the Southern Tavern singer. I even made a couple discs entitled that. My days were filled with recordings and so on. Danny would be in and out of the cottage and also Kingdom. The more time I spent with Danny, the more I loved him. I could never see me without him. He meant everything to me, and Jolene was behaving. I was glad that she no longer was giving us trouble. Whatever Danny had done to her made her a believer out of her and caused her to meet us halfway. The years would pass and fast. When you spend 24 hours working and have no time to see what is going on around you, and when you do cease to take a breath, it is years after you had started. Years pass fast. Life will pass you by. Today is the first of the new year's cycle. Go to sleep and wake up. Opening your eyes, you find it is the last of the year's cycle. Do not let life pass you by. Enjoy the time you have. Enjoy the love you feel. Enjoy the time and the love before time passes you by.